Hey, John Salamez from SimpleProgrammer.com. I've got a question here from someone who is asking about basically getting laid off from jobs and then how that affects their resume and how to deal with that. I'll just read the email. He basically says, I was wondering if you had some advice for me. I have watched your excellent videos on Pluralsight as well as read through your blog. I lost my job around 2 weeks ago because the company I was working for was not receiving any work from the Veterans Administration, so they had to lay off about 12 plus people. The longest job I've ever had has been 3+ years, and most jobs I have had have been full-time, and I have only taken a contract if I absolutely needed to. I have been in many unfortunate situations where the company I am working for has to lay off people because they lost a contract in some client or something similar. So now when other companies look at my resume, they don't see something like, this person could have possibly laid off and is looking for stability. Instead they see, this person probably keeps getting fired or likes to jump jobs and is not stable. How can I rectify this problem? So this is sort of a tough problem. There's a few ways to handle this. One of the best ways is, I always talk about creating side projects, but to have kind of your own side company. Obviously it's not going to be, if you're working for someone else and you have your side company, it's not going to be taken as seriously. But the thing that you can do with your kind of side company, if you build your own sort of business on the side and you're doing some consulting, right, is you can group your contract work into that. So in my history, in my past, I was a consultant both completely independently, and then also for, I've done contract jobs where I worked for one particular client. I was basically an employee, but I billed it through my company. And so what I've done is I've kind of grouped those things under my Simple Programmer. I've changed the name of the company, but I've grouped it under that company because it's essentially I was working for myself as a contractor, contracting out to another company. So you can kind of use that to show some longevity, especially if you have, let's say you had 4 or 5 short contracts in a row. Well, if you show that they were all for the same company, your own consulting company, then that shows continuity there. Then you can kind of reframe that. I'm not saying lie, but you can reframe that to make it look more like you were working at the same company, but you had different assignments, right? That's how I would sort of play that. Now, in your particular situation here, you said you haven't done very many contract jobs, so that makes it a little bit more tough. So showing that continuity, it really depends. I think a lot of this has to do with how you present yourself and your cover letter when you apply for a job, and how, obviously if you've been following my advice, I always advise that you don't just blank apply for a job, right? You know someone, you talk to someone, they refer you in. And so you want to make sure that you're talking about the fact that you are looking for a permanent company, that you're looking long term, that you're looking to stay somewhere, possibly your career, 5 years down the road. Make it seem as long as possible. When you explain, your gap, your history of short time, I think I'd be pretty honest. One way to spin it, if you can, you got to pick the things that you can, is if a lot of it was startups, or probably if companies are laying people off and you keep on getting at the companies that are having layoffs, they're probably somewhat startup or small companies, right? Because that's more likely. Not that big companies don't ever do layoffs, but if you're having the string of them, you can explain that you spend a lot of time working at small companies where it's not a very guaranteed future, but you're looking for something more stable. So that's some of the things that you can do. If you come in stellar as well, you just gotta. You can compensate for this by coming in better than the other candidates for the job. Then it's not going to matter as much, because most companies would rather have someone who's a stellar programmer for 2 years than someone who is horrible for 10, right? So you can also come in that way. It's definitely a difficult thing to overcome. On the resume itself, I would probably take the months out so that you can show years. And if you get asked specifically months, but that might make it seem longer. The other thing you can do is you can restructure your resume so you don't even put the timeline so much, or you very minimize that and make it more focused on the skills and what your current objective is, and other things like that. You just have to be careful. You want to be honest. Obviously, you don't want to lie, because that will bite you. But another thing to consider is, in the future when you take jobs, make sure that you take a job this is very unlikely to happen. I mean, you're going to have to make sure that you don't have this repeat history. At some point, it might even make sense to just cut your history, so you only show the last few jobs, the ones with the higher longevity. If something's really short, you might not even put it on your resume. There's a few things that you could do there. It's kind of tough. I mean, if you've been somewhere though for 2 years, if most of your jobs have been like 1 or 2 years, you're probably okay, right? I think that's pretty acceptable. But I've never had a problem. I had, most of my jobs were 2 years, I would say, in my career when I was working for someone else, and I never really had an issue with that. So hopefully that helps you. Like I said, if you had more contract work, it'd be a little bit easier because you can put that all under that same umbrella. But yeah, it's a tough problem. I think it's a little bit less of an issue nowadays because it's more expected. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Don't bring it up. Do not bring it up, though. There's no need to draw attention to it. Only if you're asked about it. Only if you feel, talk about how what your goals are, looking for a long-term company, somewhere stable to stay. But do not bring up the fact. Do not offer up an explanation of why you have short stints or being laid off. Don't say the word layoff. Don't volunteer that up, because someone might not be thinking about that, and then you might make them think about that. Oh, all right. That's all I've got for this one. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you like these videos. Take care.